So it's lovely to be able to speak to you today. And I'm joined by my colleague, Kate. Do you want to introduce yourself, Kate?
I
You on
was
mute?
muted.
Oh,
I was muted. I'll unmute myself again. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kate Scheel. I'm an early years regulatory inspector working in the East Midlands.
brilliant, thank you. And we thought it would be helpful if we had a real live inspector with us to be able to use Kate's expertise, because what I plan to do for this session is just take you through some of the slides that we've looked at previously, but give a little bit more time to some of the aspects of kind of inspection practice, what happens before inspection, what happens during inspection and afterwards, so that we can really discuss that in a little bit more detail and get some real life kind of experiences and anecdotes about what that looks like in practice. So I hope that's helpful for you. If you have any questions as we go, if you pop them in the chat, and we'll try and get to them as we go. But if there are any questions that we've not covered by the time we get to the end, then we'll try and cover them at the end. There may well be things that we need to take away if they are sort of policy queries or something like that, but we'll do our best to answer everything that you throw at us. So I can see a question already, which is great. So will this cover inspections for schools or just nurseries? So this framework, this focus on this presentation today is about early years registered provision. So it will be slightly different to what happens in a maintained school or maintained nursery. It will be different to school inspection. Some of the themes will be similar, but this focus is on early years registered provision. So if you work in a provision that has a separate early years registration. Okay. So just taking you through what we want to cover today. We'll give you a little bit of context and just recap really on a little bit of the background about why we've got to this position. We know that this renewed framework wanted to focus on the most disadvantaged and vulnerable, and we've really tried to make sure that they're at the heart of what we do. So we hope that comes across today in some of our explanations as to how this inspection framework, what it really looks like in practice. And I think there's absolutely a recognition that at this point in time for this renewed framework, that we recognise that we needed to reset our relationship with the sector, and that we've really tried to listen to what people have told us through the big listens. So whether that's come through parents or professionals as yourself, and all of that information we've tried to evaluate to help to feed into this renewed framework so that we can make changes to the way that we work. So you'll know that we've introduced a new report card, and we're going to be sharing with you what those changes look like in practice, and also what they mean for your particular setting. So, for example, if you work in an out-of-school club, or you're a childminder, or you're at daycare. So please do fire the questions away. Hopefully we'll be able to cover anything, but it's a great opportunity for you to ask things, and hopefully we can reassure you and put your minds at rest. Okay. So just a bit of the context before we start. So the journey so far. So we know the pressures of leadership, and we know also and recognise the pressures that inspection was putting on you as leaders. And that goes through your sort of daily responsibilities as leaders in a setting. And we also recognise that the kind of accountability that you have as leaders, that Ofsted was sort of adding to that burden. So that's been absolutely first and foremost in our thinking about how to adapt the education inspection framework. So you'll know that we held the big listen last year, and that was really a chance for everybody to help shape the future of our inspections. I've just realised it's the year before now, isn't it? 2 years ago, 2024. So a huge thank you to everybody who contributed to the Big Listen in 2024 and then our consultation last year as well. So you'll know that in February last year, we held a 12-week consultation which set out a series of proposals for change. And we received more than 6,500 responses to that from parents and from education professionals. We also gathered feedback through focus groups and round tables. We held in-depth discussions with sector experts. We also carried out test visits for this renewed framework to really test out the methodology that we were proposing. And there was also independent research that was carried out on behalf of Ofsted to further test out that methodology. So all in all, the changes that we've implemented since last November are based on a rich and varied evidence base. So you can see the response to the consultation on our gov.uk website, and obviously on there are the published final versions of our toolkits and our new operating guides, and they really help to sort of set the scene really for the methodology. And what we really want from that methodology when we turn up and when Kate appears on your doorstep to do your inspection is that it looks and feels different. That's the key aspect that we wanted to take through to this renewed framework, but also that we put children first, particularly those who are disadvantaged or vulnerable. We've also tried to balance all of that with focusing on making these changes fair and empathetic for you and for all professionals, whilst making sure that we don't lose sight of our core purpose, which is that collective drive to raise standards in the early years. So these reforms, this renewed framework, came into effect in November 2025 for early years. So it's already a few months old. So it's really good, I thought, to be able to share some of our experiences so far. There may well be people on the call who've had an inspection at this point. It would be great to hear from you and your experiences. But when we get to the part where we sort of talk about the differences, we'll just have a discussion around actually what that looks like in practice for you as providers. So just a bit of a summary of the changes. So you'll know that we've introduced a new inspection report card, and there's a slide later that just gives you a bit of a screenshot on that, because it is very much a kind of visual picture on the front page, and then behind that sits a narrative summary of assessing strengths and any areas for improvement. We've also got a new 5-point grading scale, so really considering how we set high expectations while encouraging improvement wherever it's needed. And so you'll know that we changed the original proposed wording for the grading scale. So we now have urgent improvement, needs attention, expected standard, strong standard, and to identify the very best provision in the country, we've changed that highest grade name to exceptional. And originally, when we first published the consultation in February last year, we proposed that settings would submit a case study for approval for that exceptional grade. But I think you'll be very pleased to know that that idea has been sort of put on the back burner for now, and that instead inspectors will evaluate exceptional practice by applying the toolkit just as they would with any other grade, and that will be subject to the usual quality assurance and consistency checking. You'll know that there's a renewed focus on inclusion, and that's really with the rationale that we want to help break down barriers to learning and to well-being as well. So inspectors will evaluate whether education providers are providing that high quality support for all children, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, those who might have SEND, and those who are known or previously known to children's social care. So we have a new inspection toolkit, for grading settings, and that's what Kate will use when she's out and about at your setting. And the toolkit shows leaders and inspectors the evaluation areas that we're focusing on and how we'll assess and grade providers. So there's a wider range of evaluation areas than in the previous methodology, and we did streamline that following responses to the consultation. So I'll give you a bit more on that later. We also gave clearer definitions of the grades following consultation to make sure that we could more clearly differentiate between the different grades within the renewed framework. So taking steps to reduce workload, we designed the toolkits so that they reflect the statutory and non-statutory requirements that are already placed on you as settings. And for us, obviously within EY, that's primarily the EYFS. So you'll note that the toolkit is designed around the EYFS so that we don't ask anything above and beyond the requirements that are in the EYFS. There's also information within the operating guide around what you can expect in terms of workload. And we'll also, on inspection, evaluate your work to support and promote leader and staff well-being, and that will be considered as part of the leadership and governance evaluation area. Our inspection findings will be grounded in a clear understanding of each setting's unique circumstances. So the new operating guide, and there's one for each remit, sets out how leaders and inspectors will reflect on a provider's context and their priorities. And there's also a new online insights platform, so Ofsted Explore an Area, and that gives parents and providers key information about the education and care services in their local area. And we'll talk a little bit more about that this afternoon, because inspectors are using that tool to help them to understand the local area that the setting is operating in when they're preparing for inspection. And you can also access it as leaders. But it is a starting point, and it's important to stress that it won't provide any grades for our inspectors, but it's a starting point for planning and discussion. And as you know, in the early years, we are the regulator, so we've tightened our ability to regulate through this framework. So we've learned from when things have gone wrong, unfortunately, in the past, and we've more closely aligned the framework to the EYFS. And therefore, to reach the expected standard, settings need to be meeting the requirements of registration and the EYFS. So where a setting is graded urgent improvement, we'll normally re-inspect within 6 months. And for settings graded needs attention in any evaluation area, and where safeguarding standards are met, we'll normally re-inspect them within a year, so within 12 months. So we've strengthened our approach to inclusion, and that's really crucial across the whole of this renewed framework. So we have a separate inclusion evaluation area, but inclusion will also be a key theme across other evaluation areas as well. So as part of the inclusion evaluation area, our inspections will look at how settings are addressing barriers to learning for all children. So we'll always start with those children that are the most vulnerable. So we'll be particularly emphasising those from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds, those with SEND, or those known or previously known to children's social care. And we'll also evaluate how well settings ensure high quality support for all children who may face other barriers to their learning and or their well-being. And you'll know those children best. So we'll work with you as leaders to help us to understand the context of your setting, and that will be informed by data, but most importantly by professional dialogue with you. So here are the evaluation areas that you can see. Safeguarding standards will be given a met or not met evaluation in early years, as in schools and other remits. So we have inclusion, we have safeguarding, and we also have curriculum and teaching, achievement, behaviour, attitudes and establishing routines, children's welfare and well-being, and leadership and governance. Now, where there are no early years children present and or on roll at the time of the inspection, inspectors will only evaluate and grade leadership and governance because there's no other reliable evidence that we can use to assess the impact on children of the other evaluation areas. So inspectors will use leadership and governance to determine the provider's ongoing suitability to meet the requirements of the EYFS and the childcare register, if that's applicable, and they will grade against the expected standard, needs attention, and urgent improvement grades only. Now, if you're at an out of school setting, you'll know that the learning and development requirements of the EYFS don't apply if you're a before and after school setting or holiday provision, and that would also include childminders who only provide care before and after school or during the school holidays, for children who normally attend reception or older classes during the day. So for those providers, the curriculum and teaching and the evaluation, achievement evaluation areas are not applicable for you. So when we're looking at inclusion, we'll gather evidence that reflects the typical experiences of children, the systems and processes that you put in place for practitioners to work with parents in meeting children's differing needs, whilst taking into account the context of the setting. So we'll gather evidence on areas like curriculum and teaching, and we'll consider how well those are designed inclusively to meet the needs of children who might face those barriers to learning and or their well-being. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about case sampling in a bit more detail in a few minutes, but I just wanted to emphasise that case sampling isn't the same as a case study. So what we wouldn't want you to go away with is thinking that you had to prepare anything prior to the inspection. You absolutely don't need to do that in terms of a case study. The case sampling is the term that we will use on inspection, but it absolutely doesn't need any sort of prior preparation. Okay, so just a reminder of, as I said at the beginning, inspections looking and feeling different. So what we hope through this framework is that we're moving towards a more supportive, empathetic approach to inspections, and the starting point for us for every inspection will be the expected standard. So is this setting meeting the expected standard? But what's really important is that we take into account each setting's context and we really consider that. And we're going to talk about what the inspection will look like when we're actually there. And I hope that you will see that it is a more collaborative approach. We've really tried to test this methodology out and to revise it to make it feel more collaborative from start to finish. We want to be more consistent in our approach as well, and that's really important. We know we've had that feedback previously, and it's a difficult balance actually in taking into account the context of each individual setting, but also being as consistent in our approach and our methodology as we can. So we want through this framework to be able to provide clear next steps for improvement that are based on the evidence that we've gathered, and that includes conversations with leaders. But it is about us being professional, empathetic, respectful and courteous throughout the inspection process. And our Ofsted Academy is running the largest package of training currently that our inspectors have ever had prior to a framework launch, alongside webinars and events just like this. Okay, so enough talking from me. We're going to talk you through what's changing for you. So what does that actually mean for you? Excuse me. And I'm going to ask Kate, as we go through these bullet points, So just try and explain, if possible, Kate, a little bit more about what that actually means on inspection and what you do as an inspector working collaboratively with providers for each of these points. So firstly, considering data. So I talked about our Ofsted Explore an Area, and that's for inspectors to really understand the context of the local community. So if you haven't seen that data, it includes deprivation data, take-up of early years pupil premium, obesity levels, oral health data, etc. Is there anything you can share with us, Kate, about how you use that data and the kinds of things that you consider?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will go onto that website and have a look whilst I'm planning an inspection, to have a look at the locality, which is done by the local authority area, which gives percentages for children in different age ranges, but primarily for children under the age of 5. And as Jude's just explained, it focuses on very specific data. It focuses on the uptake of the 2-year-old funding. It also focuses on the uptake of universal funding for 3- and 4-year-old children, for example. So it's really useful tool for inspectors to get an idea of local data in relation to national data, so those percentages, and it's interesting. It's interesting to see the differences. So it also focuses on children who have SEND, for example, and those children who already have an EHCP in place. So when we then make the planning call and also the notification call with the provider and leaders, it really gives a focus for a discussion point in terms of, oh, I happened to notice that when I was looking at the data. So, for example, if that particular locality, there's, quite a significant difference in, let's say, oral health compared to national percentages, for example. And then it might steer that discussion into what are you doing to counteract that and to support that, not only for children, but also for families, parents and carers, any specific things that you are doing in your setting to overcome some of those difficulties. If there's a high percentage of children who are eligible for EYPP, for example, we would explore that through discussion as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate. And I think it is, just worth stressing that it is a starting point, isn't it, for discussion? It is a starting point. But I think also it's probably worth mentioning that our inspectors, our team of inspectors, could be given allocated inspections to complete across the whole of the East Midlands. So they might not be working in one particular locality, and they could be working in a locality that they're not too familiar with. So it's useful as a starting point to try to get an understanding of that area. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So hopefully that's covered data, and I've put the Ofsted Explore an Area site on the chat. Now, when you go into that, don't look for yourself in terms of searching for individual providers. If you just look under the local authority area, that's how we use the tools. So we can look under the local authority sort of data and extract that from there. But it is interesting if you haven't seen that already. Okay, so let's move on to what else is changing. So if you're not aware, we now make the notification call, so the first call before 10 a.m. in the morning. Then we follow that up with an email And that's really to enable the sort of sharing of information process before the inspection. So we send you as leaders an email, and that signposts you to some useful information about inspection. And it also asks you to prepare some of the data that we would talk through in the later call. So that's only information that we would have asked you previously. So it might be sort of numbers of children on roll, numbers of children in receipt of early years pupil premium, qualifications of staff. It's all that kind of data that we would ask from you. So that all happens fairly early on, and you will receive your notification call for inspection before 10 a.m. If you're a daycare setting, it would be the day before, the working day before your inspection. If you're a childminder, it would be up to 5 working days before your inspection. But I'll come on to talk a little bit more about childminders later. So you receive an email, you have your notification call, receive an email, and in that call, that first call, you arrange to have a later, more extensive planning call with leaders ahead of the inspection. And we aim for that planning call to take around 30 minutes. And what time of day have you been arranging those planning calls, Kate? Is it in the afternoon generally?
Yes, it's mostly in the afternoon, Jude, but it's very specific to each provider, and you know, we work collaboratively together to agree the most suitable and convenient time, mostly for them, to have that call later on, and also to give them, give providers time to, complete the short information in the email about data. And I think, the greatest benefit of the planning call is it really establishes a really nice positive relationship straight from the start. We really get a chance to have a very good chat, and I will use that word, chat, discussion, about your setting. And it really helps to bring it to life. And it replaces that learning walk that we used to do. And it just gives a feel for the inspection, and just sets the groundwork straight away, ready for in the case of daycare providers, for the following day. And hopefully it gives lots of opportunity as well to ask any questions, and hopefully to very much reassure providers, and hopefully also to reassure staff about the inspection.
Brilliant, brilliant, thank you. And wherever possible, we've been trying to do those by video, haven't we? How has that gone so far?
Well, for me, it's gone brilliantly. I think there's only been one blip, and unfortunately, the provider's their video wouldn't work, so we had to just revert to the old way, the old-fashioned way of a normal phone call. But everything else has gone very smoothly, and I very much have asked, whilst on the inspection, how did providers find the planning call, the notification call, and all the inspections that I've done so far, it's been received extremely positively, and said it had really put providers at ease. And actually the fact that they've been able to see me as well as speak to me and go through, the day, and, iron out any queries, really helped them.
Yeah, brilliant. It's a small thing, isn't it? But being able to put a face to a name, and I think, even when we're talking here, when you're interpreting somebody's body language and when they're talking to you, it's so much easier on video. So I think we have had some really positive feedback on that. But if it doesn't work for you, and for sometimes for us it doesn't work either, it's not the end of the world. You won't be at a disadvantage if the technology doesn't allow it to happen. So we know things happen, and it's not always our friend, is it, technology? We've had a few issues today, I think, Kate, haven't we, with technology?
Yes.
But yeah, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter. It's absolutely fine. We'll carry on with a telephone call. And as Kate's mentioned there, because we're gathering some of that information that we previously would have gathered on a learning walk, because we're gathering that prior to the inspection, we no longer complete a learning walk when we get there. So when you actually arrive on site, Kate, no learning walk, just talk us through, can you talk us through the first 5 minutes? What do you normally do when you get there?
Well, personally, I normally ask where the toilet is, but we'll skim over that. Anyway, now on a serious note, it's a meet and greet. And very early on, the manager or a member of the management team will take me around, whatever type of setting, whether there's 2 rooms, 4 rooms, 1 room, it doesn't matter. Just just again to put a face to a name. This is Kate, this is our inspector. She's come today, and to greet everybody sometimes before the children and parents arrive, sometimes not. So sometimes I'm greeting children as well, and parents are starting to arrive. Would you like me to talk about some of the activities that we do?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Pretty straight away now. So it's done, it's dusted. We asked to see DBS records for staff, for all members of staff, and anybody involved with the provision. So that's done straight away. And to touch base and have a discussion around safer recruitment. So that links in with obviously safeguarding, which will continue throughout the day, and other discussions will be had with staff and DSLs and management team. But the meet and greet is very important, the most important. But we do some safeguarding straight away as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate. I can see there's a question there around a learning walk with leaders in schools. So this, I'm just going to stress again, this is early years registered provision. The school methodology is different. So you would need to access the school framework and their operating guide around the methodology, because it is different, and there are elements of the school practice that still do have a learning walk. So I don't want to confuse anybody today, but for early years registered provision, we no longer carry out a learning walk. And as part of the inspection now, we talked about it being collaborative, and on that planning call, it really is about working with leaders, isn't it, Kate, to try and work through what are the important things that you want to focus on this inspection. What is the provider particularly proud of? What is it that they think they're doing really well at? What are they still working on? What's kind of a focus for them at the moment? And all of that information helps to form sort of your inspection activities, doesn't it?
Absolutely. There's lots of different discussions on that planning call. Jude's just mentioned some, but we have discussions around approaches to inclusion, as Jude said, the priorities for improvement, the vision, the ethos, anything that makes your setting unique. To really give us an idea of the flavour, the work that you do with your families and your children. And it's so helpful then before we arrive.
Yeah, and it really, I know it's sort of felt to me on the inspections that I've done that I've almost got a picture in my
Mm.
head of what's most important for this setting. So hopefully when you arrive at the setting, that extra bit of information is really crucial so that you can feel like you almost hit the ground running, don't you, when you
Yeah.
arrive because you're armed with that information. Brilliant. Okay, so I mentioned about childminders. What's different in this framework is previously we had a system where we would ring to notify you of inspection, and we would take sort of information from you about when you were available, when you were caring for children, and your routines and schedules and all that kind of thing. But we wouldn't actually give you the day that we would be arriving for the inspection. And I think we recognised that that was problematic for us all, and particularly for childminders themselves. So now, under the renewed framework, we work with you to work out when's best for us to come out and carry out that inspection with you. And that's normally within 5 working days of the notification call. And obviously, we still take into account all those things around, you know, children that you've got on roll when they're there, and the kinds of activities that you're up to. And as we've mentioned, just that bottom bullet point, so we no longer grade out of school providers met or not met. So instead, for all the evaluation areas except safeguarding, we will use the grades, but then the curriculum and teaching and achievement are not relevant for out of school provision. So a little bit more detail on before an inspector arrives. So we've talked about that first call before 10 o'clock in the morning, and you may well have heard reference to a nominee. So the nominee is a role that's not always relevant for every inspection, and it's a bit confusing in early years because it's not the same as a nominated individual. So it's not the same, and it doesn't replace this. If you're a childminder or you're part of a smaller group-based setting, there's really no need for a nominee or any expectation that you would provide one. In the context of you being perhaps part of a chain of nurseries or a larger group-based provider, you might want to nominate somebody to be that nominee if that's practical and if they can help with the inspection to help it to run smoothly, and helps with some of the logistics. But that person, that nominee, must have a thorough knowledge of how that setting operates on a day-to-day basis. So during the notification call, inspectors will ask if there will be a nominee, and they'll encourage them to be available and to join in with the planning call later. For most early years inspections, I would imagine there won't be a nominee. Kate, have you had one yet in any of your inspections?
Nominees, yes,
Oh, you have?
in larger providers, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
probably more so in sort of larger, perhaps chain providers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. And has that worked well in terms of helping the sort of the
Abs
planning of the inspection and logistics and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. They've just been there to help the day run smoothly.
Yeah.
So yeah, have been available to take part in discussions if that's applicable or appropriate, and
Yeah.
also been around to attend feedback as well.
Yeah.
So often part of the sort of wider senior management team
Yeah.
within
Brilliant.
within the provision.
Brilliant, thank you. And it's important to say that this is all of this methodology is around when it's an announced inspection. Now, we can still inspect without notice, but that would only be where our risk assessment deems that appropriate. So there's a bit more on that in our operating guide and the supporting guidance, but When we inspect without notice, anything that we would have covered during the planning call and the notification call will be discussed on arrival. And you can see on the slides there, the content of the planning call we've already been through. It's important. I just wanted to stress about reasonable adjustments. That's an important part of the planning call. So if you have any staff or yourself that you would like us to make reasonable adjustments for, it's really important that you get that information to us so that we can make sure that we are meeting the needs of you and your staff. And also on that planning call, it is around working collaboratively with you to understand your routines and to work through a timetable for the day that works for you. If you know you've got an important meeting that you can't pass on to anybody else and it's crucial that you're there, we will work around you, because obviously the children at your setting come first. So please don't worry if you have something that's is scheduled during the day, or even if you're a smaller setting and you're needed in numbers with children. This is a collaborative methodology, but it's also flexible enough to work around you. I've been on inspection with this methodology with a leader who was with children all day, and we make it work. We come back to the leader and check in with them periodically, and we do what works best for you. So please don't worry if you're not able to spend sort of long periods of time with the inspector. So what we'll do on inspection, we know what Kate does straight away when she gets to the setting. She's told us that. We hold discussions with the practitioner designated to take lead responsibility for safeguarding. Much of the inspection activities that you'll see here are quite similar to what we would have done under the previous inspection framework, but these inspections are grounded in professional dialogue. That's what starts off the planning, that collaborative approach with leaders, and then through observation and discussion with hopefully the person who knows the setting and children best, we would like to work with you so that we're seeing what you're seeing, we're learning what's typical in your setting, and we're talking to you about what you're aiming to achieve, how well you think you're doing, and how you know it's working. So we've talked earlier about giving particular focus to the experiences and outcomes of all children, but those who face barriers to their learning and or their well-being. And that's where we'll really have discussions with leaders about your approach. We'll have discussions with parents, but we'll also case sample with children. I wonder, Kate, if you could just talk us through case sampling and some of the activities that you might undertake on inspection as part of case sampling.
Yeah, absolutely. Jude mentioned right at the start our very precise focus on disadvantaged children, children who face barriers, whatever that might be it SEND, be it health reasons, because they're known to social care, they might be in receipt of inclusion funding or EYPP, any of those things. Now, those children specifically will form the children who, through discussion and collaboration, are possibly selected for case sampling. And then again, alongside the manager, the leader, we will together discuss our activities that we're going to do shared observations on throughout the day. And those activities can be anything at all. So they can be outdoor activities, planned indoor activities, story times, small group work. I've done a lot of shared observations to really focus on case study children where it's been smaller inclusion groups, for example, that's very specific to some settings to meet children's individual needs. So when we're case sampling, we're doing it through observation, which we've always done, and discussion with practitioners. What's the learning intentions? What are you hoping to get out of this activity? And then, you know, evaluating the activity, the thing that we've been observing together with that manager or leader.
Brilliant. Thank you. So am I right in thinking, in terms of the methodology, you're spending some time wherever possible with leaders, you're observing practice, you're talking about provision for particular children, and then you're sort of taking yourself away and sort of reflecting on that with leaders and talking about what it is that you've seen together?
Yes, evaluating it together.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. And it's a sort of cycle, isn't it, the inspection methodology, because you kind of carry on with that process through your areas of inspection focus and through your case sampling. And you're working with leaders to sort of say, is there anything else you want me to see? Is there anything else that we can do? If there are other areas of inspection focus that you want to follow up, it's kind of a evolving process, isn't it?
Absolutely. And at any time, we very much reassure leaders and managers that, you know, equally we can say, oh, well, actually, we haven't seen much of that yet. Is there something perhaps we could have a look at together? And equally, providers are very confident to say, oh, we'd really like you to see this. We really think this is a key strength of ours, or we really think that this will help to emphasize the work we do with our SEND children at our provision. So we're equally guided, very much so, by what providers are telling us. At the end of the day, it's your inspection. So that's really important to us. That you highlight all the wonderful work that you do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate. And then the inspection concludes with that grading discussion where you're sharing with the toolkit, looking at that with leaders, and thinking about what you've seen and how that's reflected in the grades in the evaluation area, and then the final feedback to conclude. So I'm just going to talk you through quickly the report card. So we've tried to respond to the feedback that we received on report cards. And as you can see, it's a bit of an at a glance on the first screen there. But what sits behind those dots and the grades is a more narrative and extensive summary about that provider. So we're hoping that it gives a sort of simplistic view on the front page, but then behind that, everybody can read more about the things that you're doing particularly well, and the things that you're most proud of. And it'll highlight the grades for each evaluation area, but also make clear where that's needed, what a setting needs to do to improve. And then after the inspection, much of this is fairly similar from the previous framework. So the post-inspection arrangements are that report cards are sent to you after moderation, quality assurance and consistency checking. And in most cases, that will be within 18 working days of the inspection. And you can share, as leaders, inspection findings with whoever you consider appropriate, but it shouldn't be made more public or shared with parents until you've received the final report card. And then you have 5 working days to comment on the draft. So you can highlight any points of clarity or factual accuracy that we'll respond to. And then you can also submit a complaint to seek a review of the inspection process, and that might include any concerns about grades or the inspector's conduct. and we'll respond to any complaint before we finalise the report, and then we send the final report card to you. And we normally publish final report cards within 30 working days of the inspection, but that sometimes takes a little bit longer if we've received a complaint and we're responding to that. So on that slide, you can just scan that QR code there, and that will take you to the formal response to the consultation and the toolkits and any supporting research and evidence.